So welcome to the first of the Cooperation Africa educational webinar series. My name is Nancy Kachingwe. Greetings from Harare. For those for it's morning, good morning, afternoon, and good evening. I am a member of Cooperation Africa, proud fully paid up member of Cooperation Africa. We're very pleased to be able to join the new initiative because cooperatives are really a topic that's close to my heart. My main job is the coordinator of an association called South Feminist Futures, and I work in the areas of gender and public policy. So that's me. I am your moderator for today, and have the honor of hosting our two great speakers to start this series on what are cooperatives. So the aim of the series, which will be a monthly one, we'll have a session every month, just about running for the rest of the year. It's an educational series, a lecture style, to as we the association to mobilize membership and have better understanding not only about what the vision and mission of Cooperation Africa is supposed to do, but also to become members who will be able to raise and deepen awareness about cooperatives and the cooperative movement within Africa and its diaspora. Next session, please. Next slide. So just a quick word, we will have a much longer about CA session with Amina, but just very quickly, in case for those who were not able to participate in the launch that we had in January, please do check out the video. There were some fantastic interventions, but the aim of Africa is to advance cooperatives for the socio-economic liberation of Africans. The vision is a vast network of African cooperative enterprises providing secure livelihoods, high standards of living and well-being for self-determined, efficient, and resilient Africans. I might not be the most efficient, but self-determined and resilient, I am definitely down for. And the mission of the CA is to promote the growth of cooperatives throughout Africa, particularly for women and youth, in support of African aspirations for equitable and inclusive development. So the last is Aderte, who is currently a senior lecturer in economics at the University of Greenwich Business School. His research areas are workers' cooperatives, income and wealth inequality, regional integration, and industrial policy. He's trained as a political scientist and an economist at the University of Zambia. He obtained a doctorate in development economics from the Karl Marx University of Economic Sciences in Hungary, investigating the contribution of the agricultural sector to the process of economic development, particularly industrialization. He was for several years Secretary of the African Cooperative Union in the UK. Since 2021, he has been involved with others in developing the idea of Cooperation Africa, a civil society initiative to encourage and support cooperative formation and development in Africa and its diaspora. He is currently the co-chair of Cooperation Africa. This is an abridged bio for both our speakers, so please do add any parts that we have cut out for the reason that they didn't fit on a slide as you introduce yourselves. Welcome, Aderte. And our second speaker, next slide, is Aminama, who is a Nigerian and British feminist with a PhD in organization and applied psychology from Birkbeck College. She is Professor of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies at the University of California, Davis. She's a transdisciplinary educator, researcher, organizer, and writer. Mama's most influential works include Beyond the Masks, Race, Gender, and Subjectivity, Engendering African Social Sciences, co-edited Fatah Aisha Imam. She has 30 years teaching experience on multiple university campuses and pursuing collaborative action research and documentation on film projects. And I may add that for those of us who are part of the wonderful community of African feminists and Pan-African feminists, we owe so much what we have learned and our knowledge to Amina's very generous knowledge sharing and teaching. So welcome, welcome. So I think we can go straight, can close the slides. I think we can go straight to Adote to give us this overview of what are cooperatives. We're keen to learn. Many of us think we might know, but I'm sure you're going to show to us, fill in all the gaps of things that we didn't know that we didn't know. So welcome, Adote. Please go ahead and start us off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me. Let me begin by sharing my slide with you. Okay. And okay, good. So I'm going to do a very quick overview of the different kinds of cooperatives that exist, because in subsequent sessions, we will look at the particular types, each particular type in more detail. So this is just an overview of the different kinds of cooperatives that exist. And what I'm going to do is, where it's possible, I'm going to give a little story behind the background of the particular cooperative that I choose to illustrate the type, so that we get a bit of more human interest into the discussion. So let me begin by, let's see, okay. So I will begin by going straight into one of a type of cooperative, and then I will produce this kind of summary in terms of definitions and so on at the end, when we've gone through the different kinds of co-ops and hopefully have a clearer grasp of what we're talking about. So I want to begin with purchasing cooperatives, which are common around the world, less so in Africa than in some other places. But basically, it's the business model is that businesses come together. So they could be farmers, they could be schools, they could be hospitals, they could be retail stores, and they come together to buy their inputs together. And the benefits of doing that is that they can negotiate at lower prices that would not be available to them as individual purchasers. So when let's say a group of farmers want to buy, let's say, seeds or fertilizer, they can place one order, and that one order will allow them to buy at their cooperative to buy at a lower price. And of course, then the cooperative will pass on the goods to the farmers, and so the farmers will get them at the better price that than they would have otherwise. So as I say, examples of farmers could buy fuel, seeds, fertilizers, pest control. Hospitals can buy medicines and equipment. Schools could buy textbooks and furniture. And then some retailers, one of the biggest cooperatives in that area is happens to be in the USA. It's called Ace Hardware. They are farmers who and others who buy hardware equipment, but there's a co-op called Ace Hardware that buys these machines and so on for the member farmers. So that's businesses. Essentially, purchasing cooperatives are businesses that buy their inputs together. Then we have marketing co-ops, which I'm going to use a cooperative based in Ghana actually as the example, because and the background is basically this. Until 1993, the government of Ghana used to buy directly cocoa from cocoa farmers. Then in 1993, it decided to pull out and turn the whole process of buying cocoa from farmers over to the private sector. Now, at this juncture, the representative of Ghana's cocoa farmers on the board of the state buying organization, Cocoa Board, decided that this was a great opportunity for the farmers to get involved in marketing their own cocoa. So he set up with others an organization called Kwapa Cocoa, which started buying the cocoa from the farmers and then selling it to the state board. So this happened, and more farmers came on board and ran the organization in a cooperative manner, meaning that the decisions that were taken as to what should happen, those who were members or the farmers who were members participated in that decision making. And today there are about 100,000 members. It has an annual turnover of about $6.8 million. That was in 2021 figures. In 1998, they set up, they have a number of companies, but one of the companies they set up was a company called Divine. And Divine Chocolate is a chocolate making company. It's based in the UK, and it makes chocolates for the European and American markets mostly. Kwapa Cocoa has a 20% stake in this company and therefore receives profits from Divine. And I can attest that you can, depending on which shops you go to, you will find Divine chocolate side by side with Cadbury's and various other makers of chocolate in the UK. So this marketing cooperative, this cooperative of farmers selling their produce together, represents an instance of a marketing cooperative. So they all sell their cocoa to the co-op, and the co-op then sells it on to whoever else they wish to or wishes to buy. A third kind of co-op that is possible to have, instead of people buying together or selling together, is what we would call suppliers cooperatives. And for this, I'm using the example of a company called Ocean Spray. Those who live in the US should know this company. And it was established in 1930 by 3 cranberry farmers who decided that they wanted to expand their market and were thinking of how they might do this. And their solution was to set up a business that would process their cranberries. Okay, so they set up a business that would process their cranberries and invited other farmers who were producing cranberries to join them. And so this suppliers cooperative is that the farmers who produce cranberries form themselves into a cooperative and then sell their, and then set up this business. So they own the cranberry processing plant, and they set up this business. The business buys cranberries from the farmers, processes it, and sells it to the general public. Okay, and that's why it's called a supplier cooperative, because it's the farmers who come together to supply both the capital and the cranberries that the Ocean Spray, which is the name of the company, makes. Today, there are 700 farmers who are doing this. They produce 70% of the cranberries that are produced in the US. Their turnover is not $1.2 it's $1.2 billion. Yeah, $1.2 billion is their annual turnover. And you can imagine that, you know, in the African context, you could have, let's say, market traders, mostly women, it happens in the African context, one of the problems they have is getting transportation from wherever goods are sold or goods are produced to the market. They could set up a transport business. They could set up a wholesale business. This would be a possibility available within our context. Moving on to take a different example. This is now consumers doing things together, consumers consuming together. And the example for that is something called, I take that from the UK, something called the co-op. The co-op was established back in 1844, essentially. It was a group of English weavers, 28 of them, got together and decided that they would start their own shop because they felt they were being cheated by the local shopkeepers. And everybody contributed £1, which in those days was a fair bit of money. And they used that money to buy the provisions, sugar, milk, and so on, bread, put it into the shop, everybody bought, and they kept a record of what everybody bought. And at the end of the year, the profits that the shop made, some of those profits were distributed to these, anybody who was a member, based on how much they had bought from the shop. So it wasn't based on the fact that you put in £1, it was based on how much you bought from the shop, which in cooperative speak is called patronage. So your patronage is what determined how much you receive. So this is a business that's owned by its customers. And today you can still become a owner of the co-op. You still costs only £1. And you can then attend the AGM and voice your opinion. They sell groceries. They're a huge outfit. And it has about 4.3 million members inside the UK. And its turnover is around 11.5 billion pounds every year. So these figures indicate, among other things, that cooperatives do not need to be small. All right? They do not need to be small. They can grow and become big. Just Ocean Spray, the co-op, Kwapa Cocoa itself, all right? All are instances of large businesses. And that's important to think of. So we shouldn't think of cooperatives as just something that is very small, that, you know, very, very, very poor people get involved in and remain poor. That is not the case. I now want to turn to financial consumer cooperatives. So the co-op, which I just mentioned, is a consumer co-op. And another type of consumer co-op is a consumer co-op that deals with finance, the consumption of finance, and credit unions is what they're known as. And I want just to use the example, the best example in Africa is what pertains in Kenya. Kenya has a large number of credit unions, and they call them SACCOs, Savings and Credit Cooperative Societies. And this is what they're known as in East Africa and in Kenya in particular. And so people save together, and because you're a member of this credit union, then you can borrow from the common pool. Corporate credit unions were introduced in Kenya back in 1908 by the colonial regime. But today, there are estimated to be about 3,000 SACCOs in Kenya with about 4 million members. And it's estimated that about, therefore, 20% of Kenya's population belongs in some way to a SACCOs. There are lots of different other kinds of cooperatives in Kenya, but the SACCOs represent about 40% of these other kinds of cooperatives. They have assets of $5.6 billion as of 2021. And the cooperatives in Kenya as a whole are estimated to produce between 40 and 45% of Kenya's GDP. Okay. Now, two things I just want to, and finally, two things I want to highlight about this. One is that the SACCOs or credit unions, they come in different flavors, and the Kenyan model is a model that allows the credit unions to lend for business purposes. The kind of standard European or Anglo-Saxon model of credit unions does not allow this. People can borrow only for personal spending, for holidays, for school fees, for school uniforms, to buy, fridges or whatever. Yeah, but the Kenyan SACCOs allow people to borrow for for business. And in fact, the assets of the Kenyan Credit Union, for this reason, they turn over much more, and the Kenyan Credit Unions are much more powerful. They have about 3 times the asset value as the credit unions in the UK, for example. The other thing I want to just point out is that despite the fact that the Kenyan cooperative, the credit unions are cooperatives, they do little lending to other cooperatives. Most of their lending is private business. And this is something that one would like to highlight and look at later on. But most of the lending that is done by SACCOs is for people who are running their own private businesses. But they're very successful. Then I want to turn to producer cooperatives, or what sometimes is called worker cooperatives. I'm going to give 4 quick examples of those, because there are many, they vary in type significantly. And there are some which are well known and some which are less well known, but are of interest. The first one I want to talk about is one is in India that was set up in 1925. What's their story? Their story is that a group of laborers who were hired to do manual work on public building roads, bridges, buildings, public works, decided that they were being cheated by the agents who hired them out, and decided to set up their own agency. And this was what is called the Uralunga Labor Contract Cooperative. And they did this in 1925. So it is a business owned by its workers. And it engages in public infrastructure. And it runs as a cooperative, meaning that everybody has one vote when it comes to decision making. Today, it has about 1,500 members and turns over 2021 figures, $600 million. Okay. And at the end of this, I won't go through the slides, but at the end of the slides, when we'll share the slides with you, or the information from the slides, there's a link to all these organizations. You can have a look at them and get a bit more information about what it is that they do. But that's Uralunga. Then I want to turn to a cooperative that is kind of world famous. It's the world's largest worker cooperative. It's based in the Basque Country in Spain. And its origins are that the local Catholic priest was the kind of the inspiration behind it. And in 1956, they began the process of forming cooperatives. And they started with, the first cooperative was made heating stoves, because in the Basque Country, it's in the mountains, it gets quite cold. That was their first product so it was for themselves, heating stoves for the region. Anyway, they grew and they have in excess of 100 different cooperatives. It's a kind of conglomerate of cooperatives operating as one cooperative. They deal with retail. They have a shop like the Co-op in the UK. They have finance, they have a bank, they do manufacturing, and they do research and development. So they do retail, finance, manufacturing, and knowledge. In fact, they have their own university that they train their members. Again, it's a cooperative, so the decision-making is done on the basis of one person, one vote. Altogether, there are 85,000 people inside of this cooperative. And their turnover in 2019 was 12 billion euros. Okay, so again, as I said, these are significant organizations. And when we're dreaming, we can dream about having something that is as big as this. Now I wanted to turn from Mondragon, which is sort of very highly centralized in Europe. I want to go to something called Seco Sassola, which is based in Venezuela. And its story is that a local Catholic body encouraged the very poor, and there's some very poor people in South America, were and still are, to begin to mobilize, to come together, sort of improve their lot. And they use the cooperative as the model. And the first one they set up was a transportation co-op. And then later this grew, they had a sort of topsy-turvy history, but later on this grew and they now have about 50 cooperatives. They operate differently from many other cooperatives. Their own principles are what they call mutuality, respect, and transparency. And the thing that makes them stand out is that they don't have a hierarchy. They have lots of meetings to decide what should happen, okay? But they have about 20,000 members, and they turn over $100 million a year in this in this province, the Lara province in Venezuela. Okay, so it's not so well known as it should. It should be better known, partly because of the lack of hierarchy. They managed to operate this huge money-making enterprise, or this huge enterprise, in a very non-hierarchical fashion. Finally, the last I want to turn to something called the Cooperative Home Care Associates. In a way, this is similar to the Uralungal Labor Contract Cooperative in that there was a group of nurses in the US back in 1985 who decided that they were being cheated by the agency that employed them to provide home care, right, to their customers. So they set up their own agency, and this is Cooperative Home Care Associates, and began to bid for contracts to provide home care. It was mostly African-American and Latina women that were involved in this enterprise at the beginning. And again, as a cooperative, all the decisions were done democratically with one person, one vote. Today, there are about 2,000 members. Their turnover is, I've taken the lowest figure I could find just to be safe, because there are figures that suggest that are somewhat more, but around $50 million a year in 2021. But it's the largest worker cooperative in America. Okay, there are other cooperatives like Ocean Spray, as you saw, their turnover is more, but Ocean Spray is not a workers cooperative. So this is a workers cooperative, and it's the largest workers cooperative in America. It's owned by women, it's owned by African-American and Latina women. And the final type of cooperative I want to talk about is what we would call a multi-stakeholder cooperative. Now, all the cooperatives I've spoken about so far are cooperatives that are owned by particular stakeholders, right? It could be the purchasers, it could be the marketers, it could be the suppliers, it could be the consumers, it could be the workers. The multi-stakeholder cooperative can have more than one stakeholder that is a member. So it could have the owners, the suppliers, the workers, customers, local residents, and so on, could all be part of the decision-making body. Its main benefit is that if you have lots of different people who are the stake in the governance of the organization, then those who are going to be impacted by the decisions of the organization will be present at the table. And therefore, whereas now, a lot of people who are impacted by decisions that businesses make are not at the table, then the decisions that are made are not are going to take into account their feelings, or rather, because they're not at the table, decisions don't take into account their feelings. Whereas with multi-stakeholder cooperatives, if the people who are stakeholders are at the table, then the decisions that are made will take into account their feelings. So that's the multi-stakeholder cooperatives, and a lot of people promote these as a good example. So just to summarize, we've got purchasing cooperatives, that is businesses buying inputs together, marketing cooperatives, businesses selling produce together, suppliers cooperatives, businesses that are owned by their suppliers, consumer cooperatives that could be businesses or individuals that are owned by their, businesses that are owned by their customers who are individuals. Producer cooperatives are businesses owned by their workers, and the multi-stakeholder cooperatives. Cooperatives are supposed to operate according to 7 principles. Internationally, there's an organization called the International Cooperative Alliance, and lists these criteria as the way in which cooperatives should work. They should be open and voluntary in terms of their membership. There should be economic participation. I talked about patronage, that is, you have to produce something. It's not your money that is going to work for you, it is you that is going to work. Okay, it should be democratically controlled. It should be autonomous. It should highlight learning amongst the cooperators so that they improve both their knowledge about how to operate a cooperative, but also their knowledge to do with whatever it is that they're doing. And cooperatives should cooperate amongst one another. And finally, cooperatives should be engaged with the local community. So these are the 7 cooperative principles which are being reviewed at the moment by the International Cooperative Alliance. Whether or not they'll be added to and in what way, we cannot tell yet. So what's a cooperative? A cooperative, the definition that the International Cooperative Alliance and the International Labour Organization use is as follows: an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. Okay, so I hope that we can see that this definition kind of captures all the stuff that we have discussed so far. I will leave this for later on. So these are the 2 slides where you'll find links to the cooperatives that I've spoken about. When you get them, please look them up. And I will stop here. Thank you very much indeed for listening.
Thank you, Adote. That was really great. I think we would have been so happy to have more and more examples of these different cooperatives, many of which we haven't heard of. But thank you also for giving us examples so that we can actually see the level of ambition that one can aspire to in terms of the cooperatives and what they can offer in terms of what I think is truly a model of economic empowerment. Often we talk about economic empowerment and we don't really think about it, but I feel that this is an example. It shows the longevity, sustainability, different governance models that are there. It doesn't have to be the sort of one strong leader at the top, but shared leadership and participation, the range that cooperatives can be set up in, from care, agriculture, finance, and obviously not only benefiting those who are members, but also benefiting the communities who they interact with. So thank you very much. You talked about it being possible to dream, and I think Amina is going to help us show how Cooperation Africa is the dream that we are trying to move towards and take these ideas to reality through Cooperation Africa. So Amina, please take the floor, and for our participants to know a little bit more about Cooperation Africa and how it's imagining a new future in Africa through these kinds of social and economic organization. Thank you. And thank you once again, Adote, for such a great presentation. Please go ahead. I think you are on mute, Amina.
It's very early in the morning here. My name is Amina Mama, and I'm one of the co-founders of Cooperation Africa, amongst other things. And I'm really happy to be here today. One of the things that struck me again as Adote was speaking was the manner in which this is allowing us to become self-determining in our own livelihoods. And it actually, in having us own our own businesses collectively, it's a powerful decolonial strategy. It gets us out from under. But my role is to say a little more about Cooperation Africa and to share my slides, which you have, and explain why, how I got in, how we get interested, how I got interested. As you've heard, this is an initiative. I'll say it came together. Actually, we were thinking hard about the situation of the region during the COVID crisis, which really put us on the spot. and reminded us. So it's during that crisis, a number of us began talking about taking concrete action to rebuild the continent and build it differently in a way that can advance our interests as African people at multiple locations around the world. And these conversations really became quite productive. And we formulated a shared mission so that today Cooperation Africa has these features. The first is that it's united by this shared vision that actually, if we organize together, we can promote the growth of cooperatives throughout Africa and the diaspora. And this might offer us a key tool for getting to the least, the most economically marginalized women and youth. And it can enable us to support the broad aspirations that Africans have for equitable and inclusive development because of the way they're organized. So we're united by a shared vision. We're energized by a shared mission and energized by a collective vision. I'll say why in a minute, but basically we came to the conclusion that we can make real material change in our lives and those of anyone who participates in this initiative, to build a vast network of cooperatives, rather like the Mondragon model, where you have an ecology, if you like, where you have mutually supporting enterprises that provide livelihoods as well as higher standards of living and well-being in the local economies. And this will help us become more self-determining and efficient and resilient, as Nancy pointed out in the beginning. But that's the energy driving us to do the work of building this initiative. And the energy, the power is a determination. And also we've got a very wide range of skills among us to promote cooperative organizing. So a group of different people, academics, economists, bankers, and different kinds of practitioners. And among us, we can develop locally organized businesses by promoting cooperative organizing. And the method to do this is to cut to the quick, to get to the financing, because it's one thing to set up cooperatives, but to ensure that they are financially sustainable, we need to have financial mechanisms, whether these are credit unions or local banks, local financial sources that will invest in cooperative enterprises. So that is the main strategy, to encourage people to form groups and set up local financing for cooperatives. And that is really the heart of Cooperation Africa. It has we envisage it as leveraging and supporting the formation of financial structures, and these in turn supporting cooperatives on whatever scale. So the rationale is actually the information and experience of all its members, and we're armed with the knowledge, and this is not new knowledge. Let's remind ourselves, Africa has vast wealth. Why are African people hungry? This is something Nkrumah pointed to, all our great leaders have pointed to, and we see every day. And the secret is deceptively simple. We must learn to produce what we consume and consume what we produce. Cooperatives offer a way out from under neocolonialism, that last stage of imperialism. They offer us a way of building locally servicing economies. At the moment, that's not what we have. Our economy remains, as everyone knows, externalized, externally commanded, dependent, and extractive. The rules of the global market system, I call it the unfree market system, are actually rigged against the interests of African formerly occupied regions. You see this in the World Trade Organization regulations. Extractive, environmentally damaging policies, increasing inequalities between North and South and compounding the climate crisis. And this has been documented in detail. Neocolonialism offers a veritable dossier on the role of transnational corporations that he struggled with as he tried to build independent Ghana. The third thing we know very well is that Africa does have wealth, but it's concentrated either in foreign hands or in local private hands. And it is used not to develop, but to exploit and for more profit. So this is a distortion of what Africa's wealth could be being used for in terms of the public interest and improving people's well-being. We have the wealth, but it is maldistributed and it is leaving the continent at an unprecedented rate. The fourth thing we know very well is our own demographic. The huge opportunity that the West views with trepidation is our youth demographic. And I think most of us now know our working age population is going to double by 2050, becoming the largest in the world. We are the oldest and the youngest continent, and the possibilities for growth with that young population are enormous. If we turn it round, if we make it a foundation of our economic activities. The West are afraid because youth unemployment is perceived as a threat and it can be socially destabilizing. The response is to find employment, to build employment. Sorry, apologies there. If we don't, we face problems. Cooperatives offer a powerful way of creating local jobs for locals. As I've noted, the last couple of years have forced us to face the realities. Some of us have worked mainly in the cultural and educational spheres, but the COVID pandemic shows us once again just how material the inequities are, even when it comes to African people's bodies. Vaccine apartheid could only have shocked the most naive or the youngest generation because it replicates historic patterns. The limited success of the People's Vaccine Campaign points to a distorted world where profit is valued more than people. And we saw during COVID the gross distortions and inequalities caused by gender and women's burdening with the care economy multiplied up. When kids stayed home, when health services were overwhelmed, women picked up the burden because of their historic positioning, their systemic positioning. And this meant overburdening the overburdened. So many of our poorest and most marginalized communities already at breaking point were faced with lockdowns that threatened their livelihoods. And all of this has been detailed in the recent issue of Feminist Africa that I refer you to for more information. So all of this led to, this is the thinking behind Cooperation Africa. And during the COVID crisis, a number of us began to have conversations. And this was in the context of a lot of African people having conversations through the COVID crisis. There was a veritable resurgence of gatherings calling for unity of thought and action. And there was a series of digital and live streamed events. And we saw a rise in decolonial movements around the world, forced to the front line, as it were, by the harshness of conditions. So in year one, we established the Cooperation Africa with 54 founding members from continent and diaspora, I think from 11 countries. And we convened for a first meeting, registered as a limited liability company in Ghana in March, and then set up a governance structure. It's highly non-hierarchical. There's a council that's elected, which makes up working groups, which all members can participate in if they want to contribute work. The highest decision-making body is, of course, the annual general meeting of members. And right now we're open for membership. So one of the major purposes of today is, in fact, to call on those of you who are not members already to join and to join and mobilize. And you might ask yourself, why? Why me? Why should I join? And the answer is quite simple. You have the opportunity to be part of the change you want to see. You can just join us and join in with the programs of activities that we are setting up for the coming months, starting with this webinar. You can become part of the community to just deepen your knowledge of cooperatives and organizing. We all know a little, but the hands-on skills and knowledge we need to share amongst ourselves so that we better learn how to organize. And that is what Cooperation Africa will be doing. It will be working to strengthen organizing skills and capacities, business skills for cooperative businesses and that kind of thing. So when you join us, I want to say, when you join us, when you join us, you'll benefit from the resources and databases that are being compiled on our website right now. Some of those will be exclusive to members, although a lot of materials will also be open source. You'll learn about examples as we began today, showing different concrete examples of what can be done and has been done in the cooperative sector. We're thinking, we have so many ideas about a film club, a book club. There are limitless possibilities. And the more hands on deck, the more we can do. So join us, and you'll benefit from, grow with us. It's like grow as we grow and make the change that we want to see. So you'd have the opportunity to participate in events, to be supported, to start your own cooperative business or financial entity. We'll be conducting research into cooperative formation and development. We will be investing in country-level cooperative financing and development institutions. That is a linchpin. Developing these is the strategy for strengthening the cooperative sector. And then you'll also have opportunities to educate and co-train with others, as we're doing today, to bring others into this initiative and this movement. What else do we do? Yes, we plan to provide professional services, and overall, this work is about promoting economic justice by building sustainable livelihoods in a way that's democratically owned and managed, end the exploitation, end the appropriation. So overall, become towards a self-sustained and self-determining cooperation Africa, which we will use to strengthen and build local livelihoods and economies. So step one is to become an active and engaged cooperativist and CA member, like those of us you see before you. Secondly is to form your own, gather others and form your own cooperative financing group to support the growth of cooperatives in country. And step three is to join us in building what is now a growing global movement. Well, I should say that we are on the crest of a wave that is rising. Just as we are turning to strengthen Africa's cooperative sector, there's a global movement that is returning to and expanding the cooperative sector that we are a part of. Basically, together, we can make it happen, all hands on deck. We genuinely believe in people's power. We already had 55 members without much effort, just among ourselves. And looking at the turnout today and the attendance at the launch, it's all proving that together we actually can make it happen. So those of you who haven't joined, join up and watch this space. I do genuinely, we all are convinced that together, knowing what we know, and with the experience that we collectively have as African people, we can indeed make it happen. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Amina. If there's anyone who is not inspired, we will have to ask them because that was really, if I wasn't already a member, or if I could join twice, I would definitely be, I would definitely be taking out a membership form right now and asking for one. And I think there may be additional questions as to, you know, what we need to film, where we sign up.
Go to the website now. Go to the website, click, and it's easy. You fill out the form, and we're charging a minimal $20, and that is to cover our running costs, because we do want to be as self-sufficient as possible.
Yes.
Putting our money, small money in where our mouth is.
Yes, minimal being the operative word. More is also possible. Thank you so much for that presentation and for the background and the thinking around the thinking and the motivation for setting up Cooperation Africa. This is not the only, I think there were quite a few pandemic inspired associations that were set up, because we although it was very tragic and a very difficult time, it did give us opportunities to connect in different ways, a little pause from the pace of life that we were used to, where we could then actually think about new solutions and really try and confront these problems. So it really, you know, it's I think one of the reasons they keep us running all the time is so that we don't have the time to think about like different ways of doing things. But this was really a very good outcome of the thinking, and we thank those of you who had initiated this process to move it forward. So I hope for those who have links, we have a little bit of time for Q&As. I think there were a couple of questions. I think one was, do you have to be a communist or socialist, or let people participate in cooperatives? I think we can speak a little bit to the principles and the ideologies. And then there was a question about whether the SACCOs lend only to members or to outsiders, and do they have to be licensed to lend? Maybe that's a question generically, and also about the functioning of the finance or credit cooperatives that Adote could possibly respond to. I will check in the chat for any additional comments, but maybe Amina, the question about the communist or socialist, which I think is really about sort of the ideological background and so forth around it, is behind that, and it's worth speaking a little bit to it. You were talking about neocolonialism and anti-imperialism, and then Adote to respond to the question around membership around the credit unions and the kind of licensing that is required. And I will look for other points in the chat. Please go ahead, Amina.
Yes, I'm also going to recognize Bongo Adi's remark in the chat. Absolutely, I see $20 is not small money for those of us in Africa. And he's asking us to consider waiving the fee for those living in Africa, please. Well, if we have, as I said, we're trying to put our money where the mouth is, which means we have to be self-determining and to some extent self-financing. We certainly will be looking at that, and we are global, so there are those who can drop $20 without too much difficulty. But to return to the ideological question, I would say that if you listened and saw what cooperatives are about, it's actually beyond ideology. And I say this as someone who's probably known for taking certain lefty feminist positions, which I do with no shame. But the history of cooperatives in Africa is that practically every independent government set up cooperatives as a way of decolonizing the economy and getting it out from the international corporate hands. And that still works. So I see it more as a decolonial strategy for self-determination and for building a locally relevant, locally organic economy that can attend to local needs. So we have local circuits of production and consumption. So I see it in these practical economic terms, but it is true that the right and the World Bank tar cooperatives as some kind of communist conspiracy. And I think that's just paranoia. Definitely people who are more socially inclined want to be in more different kinds of social relations. And cooperatives are about equality. I don't know if you want to call that communist or socialist, but certainly I have no problem with committing to the ideas of gender parity, gender justice, and advancing the youth, which is the ideology that we're pushing. And it's not really an ideology, it's about taking practical action. So for me, this is beyond ideology. It's very practical. It embraces you, whatever spectrum, wherever you are on the spectrum, because it's about real economic building blocks. Thank you for that question. No, it's an excellent question, because the tar brushing, if I may use the word deliberately, of cooperatives is an ideological thing that goes on all the time from the far right.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. there is an ideological position against a neoliberal ideological position against cooperatives, which is really about how reorganizing the means of production in order to concentrate wealth, and we are challenging that, I think. There is, sorry, Ado, to the point around the unions, and then I'll just read out a couple more comments and we'll be able to close.
Yes, okay, thank you for that. Let me just tag on something to the answer that was given to this question.
Camera.
Yes, tag on an answer to this thing, to the question about communism and so on. Actually, I put a written response in, but I said that, so there are two things I would say. First is that if you're not a communist or a socialist or a progressive, you don't consider yourself to be any of those things, but you support the idea of cooperatives and you're prepared to abide by the cooperative principles, you can form cooperatives. Yes, that's it, straight up. And the second thing I would say is that actually the country with the second largest number of cooperatives is the United States of America. It has more than 30,000 cooperatives, okay? The United States is not, since I last looked, wasn't a communist country or a socialist country. Yes, some may even say it's not a progressive country. So, but it has all these cooperatives. The thing about the cooperatives in the US is that they are mostly there to support private enterprise. Okay, so what I would say is that it's small farmers who own their own businesses as, you know, investor-owned businesses, as capitalist businesses, they create cooperatives. So the question would be, if the owners of businesses are allowed to create cooperatives to support their businesses, why can't other people create cooperatives to pursue their interests? Okay, so I think that's it. And if you are a communist or a socialist or a progressive, if you support the cooperative principles, you can set up cooperatives. Yes, so it doesn't matter. The point is to support the principles. I think that's important. All right, as for the SACCOs, yes, no, the thing about it is that it's a cooperative, so you have to be a member in order to be able to borrow. All right, there's nothing, the SACCOs will not, cooperatives will not allow you to come from outside, not be a member, and then borrow, because then you're not participating in the collective endeavor. So yes, if you're a member, you can borrow, but otherwise you would not be able to borrow. So that's my quick response to that. Okay.
Can I note?
Sorry, actually, so I just, sorry, this is not an answer to a question. I've noted that there's some people who, so that we don't forget, there's some people who belong to co-ops who I've seen on the chat. And one of them, in fact, from Ethiopia has said they want to share experiences. I just want to highlight that we intend to provide space for cooperatives in Africa to showcase themselves, yes, in these webinars. So if you haven't yet identified yourself as belonging to a co-op, please contact us, send a message to programs@Cooperation Africa and tell us about your co-op, and we will then invite you to come and talk about your co-op at one of the webinars going forward. Yeah, it's really, really important that we begin to show people that what we're talking about exists and is real.
Amina, you had a comment to make as well?
I was going to point to the Ethiopians and say, let's hear from them. Please introduce yourselves. We'd love to hear. And I've been following the chat and I'm noticing suggestions, very helpful suggestions from Hakima, and also some cautionary things. But let's hear from our Ethiopian colleagues. Wandi Mageng Mushe has raised hand.
Are we able to open the floor, possibly not to present, but just to introduce yourself? And I would then just say, probably we can open a conversation with the organizers of the webinars to have a more detailed description of the cooperatives that you would like to share an example of. And thank you for offering that. We would really love, actually, we would love to encourage everybody who has examples of cooperatives that they know of, to please share those with us so that we can also showcase all the experiences. They don't have to be super successful. They don't have to be $1 million ones. We learn from failures as well as successes, but please do share with us or email us cooperatives that you think it would be worthwhile us looking into. Thank you. Also, I think Donald had said he's joining straight away, so please follow Donald's example in the chat. Then I think there were questions around payment and modalities. I think that can be referred to the executive committee to think about ways that the different possibilities and options. It should not be a situation that membership is a deterrent, or the membership fee is a deterrent to joining. So I think different solutions can be provided while sticking to the principle of a membership fee. And then I think that the function is not allowing anyone to talk from the audience, so that may be difficult. Apologies for that, but if there's a way of solving it. And Eunice has a question. Thank you for the reminder. Please, do you need to belong to an already existing cooperative before you are eligible to join? No, I am not a member of an existing cooperative, and I am a member. So that is fine, but the idea is to encourage the growth and development of members. And another question, how would the traditional hierarchical culture of chiefs, etc., work in the African context and follow the principles of a non-hierarchy? That is a question. There's a point about the website is not working. We will try and solve that. I think I also tried to open it and it didn't seem to be going through. So I do hope that I've covered almost everything that came in the chat and the comments. Thank you very much to everybody. I'm going to give the last words to Amina and Adote to answer the questions that are outstanding, any comments in the chat that you would like to pick up on, and then you will conclude. So we will go reverse, start with Amina for your closing comments, and then Adote, and then we will be able to close. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Nancy, and thank you everyone for all your comments and for your participation. Yes, the webinar format doesn't allow around the discussion, but we will be convening a series, so you too can be a guest on this spot. I'm looking to see if more people from co-ops, other than our Ethiopian brothers and sisters, have signed into the chat, because we're convening these and we want to have you as guests to engage in a dialogue, so we bring the reality into play as we make progress. But mine is really to once again say I found it necessary to join this initiative the minute I heard about it. And someone as old, and some might say critical and cynical, this is for me very real, very concrete, not too academic, and a very practical way of practicing what one preaches and finding ways to benefit from living what one wants to see happen. And that is a deeply felt commitment. So I urge others to join the party, as it were. We will grow slowly, but thoroughly, and we need people on board. We will make it happen. So thank you all for your attention, and it's great to see all of you here today. Thank you.
Adote?
Okay, thank you. Just to quickly try to respond quickly to the various things. if there's any, I noticed, I think it's Eunice, you raised a question about, well, no, that's been answered. Anybody who wants to provide information about their own cooperative, or they know of a cooperative that they want to ask us to invite to showcase themselves, the email address is on the chat, programs@cooperationafrica.org. Please send your information there, or contact us, write to us there, and we will link with you. It is true that governments, not just in Africa, but elsewhere in the world, do not like civil society to organize, do not want civil society to be autonomous. But this is a reality that we live with, and we can only change it through struggle. We can only change it by doing things autonomously and trying to push back. And so that is not to dismiss the problem. It is a problem. It is an issue, but we have to engage it. And if we engage it sensibly, surely we should be able to make advances on that. In terms of the chieftaincy question, yes, we have lots of people who will bow down and do all manner of things in the face of when confronted with the chief, but they also have democratic tendencies. So we want to tap into the people's democratic tendencies in order to build this kind of cooperative venture. What I would just say is that our next session will be on the 29th of April. It will focus exclusively on credit unions, on specifically SACCOs, and the speaker will be Dr. Sally Ann Decker, who is an associate professor at the University of Greenwich Business School, and she's from Sierra Leone, and she's an expert in credit unions especially. So she'll be speaking on that on the 29th of April, and we will send out information well in advance so that you can respond to that. And all I would say is that thank you very much for the questions. Thank you very much for attending. Let us build a community that takes us forward, and so that as soon as possible, we can begin to build the financial institutions that will support and sustain cooperatives on our continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If it's possible to paste the dates in the chat for the next session, sure. Just so that in our busy schedules, we have already started to save the date for that. That would be great. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can listen to recordings from launch that we had, and this recording will be up on the YouTube channel for you to be able to share and use in any teaching. It is great that we do have, it's true, we noted in the chat, sorry for not acknowledging that there were several people from cooperatives who had joined this session and are already volunteering to share examples with us in collective spirit. So thank you very much for that. There was a comment around, I will just repeat around the French and the interpretation. It is unfortunate that we cannot provide interpretation for these sessions because of the expense, and we are not well funded at the moment. Hopefully we would be able to get funding to provide at least transcripts of those. Maybe look at other ideas if necessary, to see if we can have sessions that are in French covering some of the same topics if we don't have interpretation, and can find speakers from those from the Francophone and Lusophone countries. But please do bear with us that we were only able to run the session in English. It is something that we're very aware of and would like to resolve quite quickly. Thank you to everyone. I'm going to end that now. I think that's Good. Thank you very much to the tech team that have been helping help us to set up the session. Thank you to our Adate for all the work you do behind the scenes, running around for many things, and keeping everything going, and for the great presentation, really very informative. We learned a lot. And Amina, thank you for the inspiration to encourage us all to join Cooperation Africa and understand what it's about, and encourage us all in this endeavor. It is both a political and an economic empowerment question that we have here, and it is very Pan-African in its spirit, which you are. So thank you very much. I think we can close down now. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. No, looks like it's all good.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, thank you for your moderation, Nancy. And thanks everyone.
Very much. And to the participants, please do return. Please write us. Please send your comments and your feedback and your ideas. And we look forward to seeing you in a month or so for the next session. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.
Bye.